Welcome to FYI once again. My guest today is B.K. Parent, the B for Barbara, if that's all right,
Yeah, Barb.
to disclose. And she is an authoress of some phenomenal young adult fiction. I call her unabashedly, and to not embarrass her, the next J.K. Rowling. The characters and the situations and what she's created in this series of books are just, they are mind-blowing, and they do remind me in some respects of something that would be similar to fascinating for children, for young adults, as Harry Potter was and is. And can't extol your virtues enough, Barbara, but thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for your kind words.
You're welcome, all from the heart.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Barbara and I actually were seat partners at a book signing recently, about 3 or 4 months ago in Afton, Minnesota, and just was fascinated by everything from the artwork to the stories and everything else. And so let's find out a little more about you and how this evolved. Barbara's shirt says "Neebing Blessed," this sweatshirt, and Neebing is a section of southwest Ontario between the U.S. border and Thunder Bay. Mm-hmm. And I'm an honorary citizen of Thunder Bay, so I've known about neebing for a long, long time. I'm needing a tooth transplant here, but anyway, you can tell us how this all came about, but first I'd like to find out your background.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Madison, and went to the University of Wisconsin. Of course, there it's the university, and graduated in education, history, and sociology. So I started my career as a history teacher. Went off and did other things for a while, and then eventually ended up in as a school counselor in outstate Minnesota, and then the last 20 years I was the school psychologist in the White Bear Lake School District.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That in itself would be worth a lot of books, I would assume.
Well, I often thought it would be fun to write down all the fun things that children say, mm-hmm. But I think somebody already did that. So.
Well, thank goodness it evolved into something else. How did you get motivated into doing what you do with these books?
I have a niece who went to St. Olaf, Catherine, and one of her college roommates got a job 42 miles up the Gunflint Trail out of Grand Marais, and needed a ride. So I said, "Oh, I'll just take you up there." And she was from Alabama and said, well, she'd like to say she'd been to Canada, and it's so close. And I said, well, we'll just take a road trip. So we drove up to Thunder Bay, and while we were wandering around trying to figure out how we could get to Fort Williams, the next morning, we saw a sign that said Neebing. Neebing Roadhouse, Neebing Avenue, Neebing. And we got to giggling about the word Neebing, and by the time the evening was over, we decided they were small and furry and wily and elusive and mischievous, but basically tender-hearted. Mm-hmm. And the next morning, we're drawing what we think Neebings look like on napkins at the where we got breakfast. And so I took her to her job, and I remembered what it was like to be away for the summer at a summer camp or somewhere and liking to get mail. So I thought, well, I'll write a short story about Neebings. And I went home and I sat down to write a short story, and I wrote chapter 1 of Journey's Middle. Neebings don't even show up until about chapter 5 or 6, and we've never seen one. And now there are 5 books, and the 6th one is being edited, and we still haven't seen Neebings. And I'm wearing a sweatshirt that says Neebing Blessed, because some of the characters are considered Neebing Blessed. The elders say that when the Neebing Blessed walk the land, great change is coming.
And when you say they're mischievous, in which way do they create mischief?
The main character in the first book is a rover. That's like an itinerant craftsperson who travels about the countryside. And built into their home wagons, which are like caravans or gypsy wagons, is a telescoping tube that has a door in it. And rover tradition says that you need to leave a gift for the Nebings. And sometimes they'll leave one back. But if you don't leave a gift for a Nebing, then they can be mischievous.
And I'm thinking of mischievous leprechauns, possibly. Are they akin to leprechauns?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But they can get away with mischief, and sometimes that mischief can help you. There's a scene in the first book where there are two gentlemen who are staying in the same camping area as our heroine, and she's about to leave, and you have a feeling that they might be following and might not be people you wanted to meet. But as she's pulling out, she looks back and discovers that their horses are running off, and every time one of the gentlemen tries to catch the horse, it scoots away, and all of their tacked and bridles and saddles are all knotted and tangled up. And don't we wonder who did that?
Those little creatures.
Right.
So, did you think that just writing the one book would ever again evolve into 6 books now?
No.
Okay.
I didn't think it would ever be a book. It was just what I would do for my young friend, Sarah, is that I would send her a chapter on Monday, and then she would walk the mile down the gravel trail to the post box on the road and get a chapter, and then she'd have to wait a whole week because I left a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter before she got the next chapter. And then if I was being particularly mean, I would leave a character in peril, and then I'd do 3 chapters about another character. That's 3 more weeks you have to wait to find out what happened to this character. So in all of the books are written as serials, and so there's a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter.
So then, does the next book, in other words, follow the storyline of the first book?
It follows the storyline, but not the same character. So in Journey's middle, Nissa is the main character, and she travels with a hunting cat. His name is Cars. He's about the size of a German Shepherd. He has a bit of an attitude, but then so do all cats. And at the end of the first book, there are 2 pieces of an object in the capital, but there are still 7 out. And the 7 have to be in the capital a year from the day. And I didn't think poor Nissa should have to do it all. So in the next 3 books, you actually meet 2 new characters in each book. And of course the overstory is that they are supposed to be finding this piece of the object and getting it to the capital, but the real story talks about what happens to them along the way. And then in the 5th book, all of the characters and all the storylines come back together.
Oh, wow. So the series actually, even with the 5th book, can revert back to what was stated in the first book.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a particularly thorny problem because Nissa's father, his past caught up to him, which sent her off on her adventure. And I've finished writing. We're in the middle of editing Torvald's Tale, which tries to answer all these questions that you have about him, but you have to make it match with everything else, and that's particularly tricky.
Have the young adults who have read these fed back to you their thoughts about what you have written? And I'm sure it's all been complimentary, but I'm just curious if the feedback you've gotten has been good for you. Have you liked it?
It helps. Yes, yeah. It helps. Especially, particularly when I was writing them, I would get feedback. What's fascinating to me is that when people read something you write, what they see in it, which may have been what you intended, or maybe they see something totally different. They see a different overview, or they see I don't know how to explain it, but it's fascinating to hear what people find in what you wrote, because you put, amazingly enough, a whole lot of yourself into a book, even if it's fiction.
Do you put anything that they've said to you into the, say, the following books?
Yes. There's a phrase, there's a couple phrases in the books that a person who's talked to and read the books and knows the books will catch in the next book and go, oh, I said that, you know, kind of tuck it in. There's some fascinating, there's some puns in the book that you can catch, and every once in a while, there's humor in the books.
Do you ever surprise yourself when you're, say you're typing? I've only written this one book. That's the only one I intend to write. But to me, just the typing itself is just horrendous. It's the worst part of it to me. But when you're typing and you're creating these things, do all of a sudden new characters come into mind only because of what you've just written? One
of my favorite parts of Journey's Middle has to do with the huntress. And when I sat down to write that chapter, Nissa, the main character, Cars, the hunting cat, and Nissa's father are running through a fairly eerie, creepy kind of woods, not one you want to be in after dark. And they're being chased by people that you don't want to catch them. And they come upon a clearing, and in the clearing there is a fountain that is either made of crystal or glass or ice, and it has a very tall woman holding a spear, and on the four corners are hunting cats. And Nissa steps into that clearing, and her father yells, "No, don't go," and a wall of thorns comes up, and he can't get in, and she's frozen in place. And the huntress appears. And when I sat down to write that chapter, I had no idea about the huntress. I don't know where she came from, but those next couple chapters are some of my favorite, what happened after that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the huntress has reappeared. She comes back in another book.
So from Journey's Middle, the beginning and what you created, and as you say, the subsequent creations, I want to get to the other books in a minute, but what I wanted to say, and I finally am going to say it, is you have won some awards recently, and I would like for the audience to know that. What are the awards?
I've entered all 5 of the books in the Midwest Book Awards, which has to do with independently published. You have to be an independently published author, so a small press, and it needs to be in I think there are 11 states that it covers in the Midwest. Journey's Middle won in young adult fiction. Journeys Lost and Found was a finalist in that, and also in fantasy sci-fi. Journey Seeker won in both, and Journey's Crossroads was a finalist. Just in October, which has been a very surreal month for me, Journey's Middle won the Minnesota Authors Project Best Young Adult Fiction Author Award.
Wonderful.
And will be written up in the Library Journal and reviewed there. So that's just unbelievable to me. You know, who knew?
That's wonderful.
So yes, and the other thing, and I have to get a plug in for Kneebing, Ontario. Kneebing, Ontario found out that I had written the books, starting with the name of their municipality. And if you don't know where Kneebing is, if you cross the border from Minnesota into Canada at Grand Portage and go past the Visitor Center, you are in Kneebing. And Niebing is essentially what I would consider like 5, what we might call townships, gathered together as a municipality. So they don't have a downtown, but they have really adopted the stories. I'm wearing a Niebing Blessed sweatshirt, and I have a Niebing Blessed wristband, and they made the wristbands because they figure they live in Niebing, and so they are blessed. They have been very grand, and they are using a grant to build Nissa's home wagon, which is like a gypsy wagon, and they're putting it in the park next to their municipal building, and they've named the park Journey's Middle. So we're having a grand time in Niebing, and I have to tell you that the more I visit that area, and the people are marvelous, they've been so welcoming, it could be Sommerhjem, which is the country that all of these books take place in. It has the large body of water, it has the high hills, it has the cliffs, it has the forests, it has the rolling hills. It really could be Sommerhjem. And it's beautiful country.
Yes.
So
Indeed.
I highly recommend visiting Niebing, Ontario.
Absolutely, they'll
Yeah.
make you an honorary citizen.
Oh, that'd be very cool.
And I hope that happens.
Yeah.
So the other books now, let's go from Journey's Middle to Journey's Chosen. Would that be the next book? Or?
No, Journey's Lost and Found is the next one.
Okay.
So in that book you meet Greer. He is he's a kid who's grown up since he was 5 years old on the streets of a rough and tumble border town. And he's a character I really have grown to appreciate, and his story is fun because he's being chased across the country by 2 different parties, and it's kind of a mystery on how that happens. And then you meet Meryl, and her family owns a messenger bird business. The fascinating thing about writing this is it really takes place in an era that's pre-industrial. So I have to figure things out, like how do you get a message quickly from one town to the next when you can't text it, and you can't call, and you can't instant message it, and you can't send an email. So those are fascinating things that you find out. I've learned a lot. What do you feed baby kittens, and are there portable forges, and all kinds of interesting things that take place. And I try and stay true to that sort of time period within the stories.
So this would be, would it be maybe you haven't identified the century, but would it be possibly like in the 14th century?
Yeah, around in there, I think. Yeah. And then in Journey's Seekers, you meet Chance, and his family are traders. They sort of think of them as long-distance trucker kind of people, and he wants to grow up to be a seeker, and seekers are people who look for the old knowledge, but he's kind of trapped in the family business. And then you meet Yara, and she's a librarian. And in Journey's Crossroads, you'll meet Piper, and her family guards the Southern Pass, and she's been a border guard and is a spy. And you meet Lam, and he isn't even the assistant to the assistant to the assistant royal gardener. So they're all pretty ordinary kind of people, and they get caught up in this adventure.
It's just one to the next.
Yeah. And then
Journey's Crossroads. What about that?
Well, that's Journey's Crossroads that you meet Lam. And then in Journey's Chosen, all of the storylines come back together, and all of the characters come back together, and Nissa becomes the narrator again in the 5th book.
I was thinking the word escapism. People, especially seems these days, need some escapism from all that's going on, and that's not meant as a pejorative. That's a compliment, because if you can find something like these books to divorce yourself from what's happening in real life, what a joy. Do you feel when you write these that you're actually also, as an educator, that you're educating people in some way?
Well, I think that any person who's writing probably blends their values and so forth within what they write. There's an evil regent who's been put in charge by his peers and is not, with great power comes sometimes great temptation to do bad things, and that's who he is. And I find sometimes when I read them, you weave some of those kind of storylines in, and hopefully the good people come out on top.
Yeah. So some life lessons?
Yeah, there are life lessons. I grew up, you always leave a place better than you find it, and that's one of the things that rovers always do, and that's in the book. And
what's book number 6?
Book number 6 is tentatively called Torvald's Tale, and Nissa comes, the main character in Journey's Middle, she comes home and finds that her father's missing, her Nana's unconscious, and the cottage is in shambles, and her father leaves her a message that says, if I'm not back in 10 days, take to the road, change your name, disguise the home wagon, you're in danger. Mm-hmm. And she's in danger because the regent's people are after him, and he knows that if they get her, that she's great leverage. And so Torvald's Tale then answers a lot of those questions about her father, like how did he get involved in this, and why are the regent people after him? Mm-hmm. And so it's really his early life up to the point that Journey's Middle starts.
How long has it taken you to write each book?
It took me 2 years from start to publication on Journey's Middle, and then I did the next of those, each one a year. I'm sort of on hold. We've just started editing the 6th one. It was finished in the spring. Mm-hmm. But my editor had a house fire, and that took about a year and I'm not going to do this without her. I can't do it without her. Sure. And so as we're in editing, so I'm going to have to call my niece and say, okay, I need a cover. And I'll on Journey's Middle, I said to her, okay, I need a gypsy-like wagon, I need hills, I need trees, can you give me a campfire? Oh, and I like Jan Brett's borders on her books, can you give me borders? And then she just does this.
So your niece has done all the artwork?
She's done all of my artwork, yes.
Oh, it's fabulous artwork.
Catherine M. Parent. Yeah, it's I like them because they really kind of fit the time period and the feeling of the stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she lives here in the Twin Cities?
She does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yeah.
Any chance for book number 7? Or are you kind of saying, wait a minute, I want to hold off for a while?
There are 3 chapters written. There is a character in Journeys Chosen. His name is Knowles. And he has a hunting cat named Uba. And he shows up in the last chapters. And he's kind of talking to me. Someone once said, do you have all of these all outlined out? Do you know exactly where you're going and what you're doing? Mm-hmm. And I will tell you no.
I love it.
I never know where they're going or what they're doing. I finally said to someone, I just hear voices. My characters talk to me, and he's pushing a little bit.
Do any current events or even 20th century events come into your mind when you're writing some of the characters?
Yes, I was glad I was not writing during the last couple months because of the elections. I try and keep politics and religion out of the books, but certainly current events, things that are going on, things that you think about, weave their way into the story if they're appropriate.
Mm-hmm. So a little subliminal there.
Probably, yes. Yeah.
What would you say the age range is for those who would like these books?
My youngest reader is 8.
Wow.
My oldest reader is 83.
Oh my gosh.
I did not dumb down the language because I feel as though you don't learn new language unless you see it and you become acquainted with it. I had a 4th grade teacher road test the books. She said good 4th grade readers on up. A lot of my readers are adults because I think the books are complex enough to get an adult to read, but there's no sex, no violence, no swearing in the books because I wanted you to feel comfortable to give it to a child and not worry. Mm-hmm. There's tension and characters get into pretty sticky spots, but nobody dies.
Well, that's good.
So far.
They're available on Amazon, are they?
They're available in hardcover, paperback, and ebooks. So you can get them, Amazon carries them, Barnes & Noble carries them, Google Books I think has them, iUniverse, which is the publisher, has them all, and you can download them on iBooks. So they are available. Oh, and Kobo, you can get them on Kobo in Canada. It's interesting when you Google BK Parent, like on Amazon, it shows up all the parenting books. It's really a bad name to have, so you have to kind of look for it to find them, but they're there.
I'm not, I must confess, I'm really not deeply into ebooks, so I'm not aware when there are illustrations. Do illustrations come up on ebooks
yes.
too?
Uh-huh.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, the map is you can find, there's a map of Sommerhjem, the country, in Journeys Chosen, and that's right there in the ebook. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to.
Well, I'm delighted.
Oh, my pleasure. We're delighted that you're here. And this is being taped just before Thanksgiving, so we hope that people will remember Christmas gifts for young adults and even for old adults.
Yes.
So, thank you again, BK, Barbara.
Thank you.
And now shameless plug time for my book. Barry ZeVAN, My Life Among the Giants. For those of you who are interested in the history of broadcasting, politics, and show business, and endorsed on the back by our former Vice President, Walter Mondale, as well as my dear friend, ABC TV's former anchorman, Sam Donaldson. So I hope you'll check it out on Amazon, and hope again to see you soon.
What makes your community feel like home? Is it knowing what's happening in your neighborhood? Or when people know your name? Connections make us a community. For more than 30 years, Northwest Community Television has connected citizens, neighbors, even sports fans through video. You can learn about the latest news through our truly local newscast. We cover and air around 150 high school sporting events every year. For our cities, we air parades and city meetings that you can watch whenever you want. Then, any citizen of our cities can create and share their own original content. We'll even teach you how to use the equipment too. We have always provided you with a connected community experience, and as life gets busier than ever, we will continue to engage, inform, and inspire through CCX Media, so you can stay connected to the place you call home.